Just 3 days after 2 police officers were shot during more ongoing BLM riots, Kamala Harris comes out and says that the protests are essential to the evolution of this country and that anything in this country that was for progress didn't come without a fight. We've seen since the beginning of these ongoing riots throughout the country, the media and Democrats refer to them over and over as peaceful protests, even on MSNBC with a burning building behind him. One of their personalities said, well, they're mostly peaceful. Mostly peaceful. The protests have been overwhelmingly violent. Now, they say 93% of the protests are peaceful, but they give us subjective criteria as to what that really means. I would say the overwhelming majority of these protests have been terroristic in nature, because when even a small percentage fight with cops, throw Molotovs, burn down buildings, attack people, and cause more than $2 billion in damage, seeing a peaceful protest is an implied threat. Why? I'm not going to blame actual peaceful protesters for what the crazies do, but I will blame Kamala Harris for not condemning Black Lives Matter and Antifa when they engage in the violence, calling them out by name. Joe Biden won't do that either. In fact, as I've mentioned time and time again, Joe Biden's staff actually paid bail for these people. They donated to a bail fund to get these people released. And Kamala Harris herself tweeted out soliciting donations to bail out people arrested during rioting, not protests. And as we know, they won't call them riots, so I can only assume she is praising the fight. Her own words. What fight is that? The fight where some guy started waving a gun around, shot 14 rounds off, hitting 2 cops? The fight where dozens of people are dead? Recently, it was assumed Joe Biden got a whiff of his internal polling on the riots and panicked, ran out of his basement super fast, stood up at that podium and said, I condemn the violence. Kamala Harris comes out and says it's essential. What are people supposed to think? When Black Lives Matter goes out, all these cities fight with cops and one guy shoots several of them. Are we supposed to assume she's not talking about that? Those are the protests. That was the protest in Louisville. What were you referring to, Kamala Harris? So forgive me if I don't take her at her word that she's praising peaceful protests, because she can come out and say Black Lives Matter extremists are causing destruction throughout this country. She won't. Donald Trump will. In a new move, Donald Trump said that the Klan and Antifa will be designated terrorist organizations. And we'll break that down and see what that's all about. But Trump has no problem saying, if you're an extremist, I'm done with you. The Democrats, however, are embracing it, encouraging it, praising it. And it's only going to make it worse, especially as we move closer and closer to the election. Right now, as I record this video, the Proud Boys are showing up in Portland. They declared a state of emergency, and I'm worried about what's going to happen. Now, the Proud Boys said they've declared victory. The Proud Boys have declared victory already because by announcing that they planned on being there, it reinstated the ability of police to use tear gas. I believe tear gas, in which case they're going to be empowered now that Antifa is coming out once again, like they've been for the past several hundred days. We're not looking at peaceful protests across this country. We're looking at people walk up to diners and threaten and harass them. That is not essential. That's a fight. That is not essential for our evolution. We're looking at people getting shot in their own cars. We're looking at people being harassed at their own homes. Kamala Harris made a tactical error in this statement. And I want to break down for you what's going on. And we've got more than this. I mean, even Bernie Sanders is saying, you know, people got to come out, get ready because Trump might not leave. And there is a fight a-coming. So when she says the fight is essential, what fight is that going to be come election day? What fight is that right now? I think we all know. Let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are many ways you can give. I got a P.O. box, but the best thing you can do, share this video. If there are people who don't believe it, if you think people need to hear this, and if you think I do a good job, seriously, if you share this video, if every single person who watched it shared, I would be bigger than CNN like that. Because word of mouth will be infinitely more powerful than their massive marketing budgets. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe to the notification bell, and you don't have to support or do anything, but I appreciate you watching. Let's read. Daily Mail reports. Kamala Harris is branded ignorant for praising BLM protests and calling them essential just 3 days after 2 cops were shot during Louisville riots. Vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris has come in for criticism after saying that protests against racial injustice, including those by Black Lives Matter, are essential for the evolution of our country, with some online branding are ignorant. Senator Harris of California made the comments during the NAACP's national convention, in which she was interviewed for more than 1 hour and comes just 3 days after 2 police officers were shot and injured during rioting in Louisville. How does rioting start? This is the question, right? So I know some people may be saying, Tim, you said she praised the riots, but she said protest. Okay. I'll ask you. Okay. I want to be fair. How does rioting start? Does rioting start by a bunch of random people just emerging from the ground, smashing things? Or do riots start after protests happened? Okay, so a protest is organized, people go out and march, and then it becomes a riot. Okay. Did Kamala Harris condemn the rioting? Like specifically Black Lives Matter and Antifa? No. Did Joe Biden? No. Did they solicit donations in support of the rioters? Yes. Do they call these riots? No. They call them peaceful protests. She's encouraging a fight, and the fight is resulting in people getting shot and hurt and killed. They go on to say, the shooting came after a grand jury's decision not to charge the officers who shot and killed Breonna Taylor. One of the officers involved was charged with wanton endangerment for shooting into a neighboring apartment. Quote, nothing that we have achieved that has been about progress, in particular around civil rights, has come without a fight. And so I always am going to interpret these protests as an essential component of evolution in our country, as an essential component of a mark of a real democracy. No, when they go to someone's house, according to the New York Times, and threaten to burn it down unless they remove their American flag, that is not the mark of a real democracy. That is a mark of a fascistic dictatorship led by zealots. And I'll tell you the important bit. Was that protest in Portland, the New York Times reported on, listed as a riot in their fancy 93% peaceful protest database? Of course not. Why? Because those people didn't destroy things. They just threatened people. Okay, fine. She's praising that. You can call it a riot, you can call it a protest, or you could call it terroristic threats. That's what she's praising. We can play semantics. I try to be fair. But no, we know what she means when she says this. She's refusing to call it out where it needs to be called out. Donald Trump, however, he has no problem calling it out. Moment Louisville gunman waves his gun around after firing 14 shots at cops, injuring 2 during first night of Breonna Taylor protests. You see, there it is. We know what these protests are, and we know what they become. As BLM demonstrators take to the streets for a third night and claim sanctuary in the church. So this story is from just today. The story from Kamala Harris emerged last night. We knew what was going on last night, the night before, and the night before that. We know what's been going on for 100+ days. You want to talk about the Democrats? Let's talk about the Democrats. They declared a state of emergency in Oregon because the Proud Boys announced they were going to show up. Why didn't they declare an emergency after, 50 days of rioting? They didn't. I don't think they care. I think they actively support the violence and support the rioters because they're extremists pandering to more extremists, and they don't care about you. Protests. I wonder why it is that in Portland, during the protests, people are boarding up their windows and hiding and complaining and fleeing. I wonder why that is in many other parts of the country. I wonder why we were expecting protests in Louisville, but people were boarding up their businesses, and police departments and courthouses were also being boarded up. Because they're not protests. Even when they don't engage in overt and direct violence, they engage in terroristic threats. There have been peaceful protests. I've praised them. I have no problem praising them because I like them. I remember watching very early on these people laying on the ground on their stomachs, putting their hands behind their back. And I said, awesome. Protest the injustice, because when someone is killed, there should be accountability in some form. Doesn't mean someone goes to prison. It means we figure out, why did this person die? They didn't have to die. Sometimes bad things happen. Very quickly, it became riots. But they won't tell you. They'll lie. They'll call them protests because they know the rioting hurts them. And that's why Kamala Harris thinks she's safe to defend these. She was speaking to the NAACP. According to Civics, Black voters strongly support Black Lives Matter. And that's why she won't call them out by name. They are desperately trying to get more Black votes. Something interesting, according to NBC News data, is that if Donald Trump can convince just 3% more of the Black community to vote for him, he wins. Nothing else could change. Literally nothing. Just 3%. And I think that's why the Democrats are panicked. They see it in the polls. So they push this narrative and they refuse to condemn the violence, meaning they will sacrifice the suburbs and they will sacrifice this country, your job and your life in a desperate bid to placate a voter base because they want to win. They deserve to lose. LA deputy is seen bashing a BLM protester with a riot shield, and hundreds occupy Brooklyn Bridge for hours as demonstrators take to the streets across the nation for a third night of Breonna Taylor protests. I highlight this to say, I think the police need reform too. I think police do need accountability. And I think peaceful protests are fine. In fact, I'm okay with, to a certain degree, nonviolent civil disobedience. And I'm critical of what I think it's in Florida, where they're going to charge people for blocking roadways. I think like very serious charges like jail time. I think if someone's blocking a roadway, you arrest them. The road is clear. You give them a slap on the wrist charge. That's what nonviolent civil disobedience is. You don't want them to start putting on masks and engaging in overt violence. The problem? They've already been doing that. But I don't think if it's already illegal, it's illegal. I don't think you need to make things crazier. But, you know, in this instance, you see there's a guy on the ground and the cop is bashing with the shield. Unnecessary. There was also a video I highlighted where a cop is walking his bike and he walks it over the head of one of these, protesters laying on the ground. Unnecessary. I don't want to see that. And I don't want to see the violent riots. The cops could pick the guy up and arrest him. OK, there is criticism. There are good reasons to criticize people on all sides. In this instance, however, the Democrats are lying to us. They're encouraging the violence by refusing to call it out and straight up saying the fight is essential. Look, maybe you want to say, Tim, you're being unfair saying that she's praising riots. OK. Then don't come out and say the fight is essential, because I'll tell you, with what's going on right now across this country with riots, by all means, you can say Kamala Harris didn't actually praise the riots. No, she just said the fight was essential, and she was referring to something else. I'm not going to pretend to know what you interpret that as or what a regular person will interpret it as. I'll tell you this. She is inciting a fight, and fights typically get physical. And if you have months of fighting in the streets where people have died and she's saying the fight is essential, I am not going to be happy about it. And I will say absolutely she is praising the riots because the riots are where they're fighting. Semantic arguments, I know. But this is the game we typically get when it comes to the left. Well, Donald Trump is taking swift action. From Just the News, Trump set to declare Antifa a terror group, making good on vow he made at start of recent riots. Trump says he will also declare the Klan a terrorist organization. I don't know if he can actually do this because of the First Amendment. But you know what? Good. The Klan's bad. That's why we as a country crushed them and said, bye-bye, we don't like you. We can still defend the free speech of an individual and whatever group, but we don't like them. So we said no, especially to their violence. So if they're wearing a white hood or a black hood, I don't care if they're getting violent, smashing up people's businesses. And I'll tell you the funny thing. You want to know why Trump? This is part of Trump's Black America plan. And I kind of thought it was funny. Why is Trump targeting Antifa and the Klan? Oh, could it be because both groups destroy and target black neighborhoods and black communities? Yeah. Well, the Klan is mostly gone and they're not marching around. When was the last time you actually saw a group of Klansmen like running around smashing things? You don't. They do their little rallies and there's a small handful of them. Antifa and Black Lives Matter, they've picked up the slack. Now you have these white individuals wearing all black and going to black communities and smashing things up. Just the News reports President Trump is set to declare Antifa a domestic terror group, making good on a promise he made after the start of the recent violent protests that have badly damaged some U.S. cities. The declaration is part of his second-term agenda and an appeal to black voters in his re-election bid. The president will also declare the Klan a terrorist group as part of his larger black economic empowerment platinum plan that also seeks to increase investments in black communities by roughly $500 billion. I'm a fan. I am absolutely a fan. I am a social liberal. That's not changed. I am not a conservative. I believe that what we want to do is reallocate funding from privileged, wealthier areas when it's in excess and provide it to underprivileged areas to improve certain things. And I say certain things. I want to teach people how to fish. I want to set a basic standard. I do not want to create a dependency. That's why I think if you've got an ultra rich area that produces a ridiculous amount of taxes, we're only as strong as the weakest link. Let's allocate some of that excess tax revenue towards areas that are, dilapidated, falling apart, opportunity zones, things like Kimberly Klacik has said. better education, and I don't mean public education, maybe charter schools. I'm not entirely sure. But I like the idea. Antifa's bad, the Klan is bad, and Trump wants to reinvest in black communities. This sounds like a great compromise with the social justice left and, well, there you go, and Trump and the right. So I'm down for it. I am. I think that we have to recognize not everybody in this country sees things the same way, and an investment into certain communities could be a good thing. We are only as strong as our weakest link, and a rising tide raises all ships. If Trump found a good plan and path forward, and he's targeting the rioters, I am happy to hear it. Quote, for decades, Democratic politicians like presidential rival Joe Biden have taken black voters for granted, Trump said. Antifa, the radical left-wing group, whose name is short for anti-fascism, reemerged as a destructive force over the summer by participating in numerous social justice demonstrations in which members would loot and burn businesses in cities from New York to Seattle. Trump on May 31st announced his intention to label the group a terror organization amid riots following the death of George Floyd, a black Minneapolis resident. The United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization, Trump tweeted at the time. Justice Department officials have raised First Amendment concerns about classifying the group as a terrorist organization. Both sides of the aisle would share the concerns, Bradley Weigman, a top attorney in the Justice Department's National Security Division, told the White House Homeland Security Committee during a hearing last year. Trump is scheduled to make the Antifa announcement on a campaign stop in Atlanta in an appeal to black voters. I believe there is a First Amendment challenge, and I'll explain. As much as I don't like Antifa, the reason why the U.S. typically doesn't label any group a terror organization is because if they commit a crime, they get arrested. If they as a group are speaking things, not inciting violence, speaking ideas, that's protected under the First Amendment, which makes it very difficult to actually declare some group a terrorist organization. Both the left and the right have made calls in some way for this. The left saying the Klan should be a terror organization. The right says Antifa should be. And I say both of them, whatever, fine, I don't care. Bill Barr was asked about this at a hearing. What he said was, though they're not, at the time, designated a terrorist organization, the crimes they commit are being charged as acts of terror. I think that's the right way to do it. I think Bill Barr hit the nail on the head, okay? When someone commits a crime, you say, here's the crime committed. I don't see why we would label the group that way. Now, it's important to note about Antifa is that although they operate as independent cells in key areas they have no overarching organizing body, but they do negotiate, share funds, travel abroad. That makes them not a domestic terror organization. That makes them a terror organization. You see, Antifa exists in the Middle East. Antifa exists in Europe and in other parts of the world. They fly the same flag. They have the same ideologies. They share money and resources. We have already seen the news about this. There had been concern among many left-wing activists that Trump would just label them an outright foreign terror organization and then go after people who are here adhering to it. Recently, there was a story that two men were planning a Netflix-worthy attack on Trump Tower. And that was in the name of ISIS, a terror organization. They've been arrested for it. So if Antifa is operating overseas, this is not a First Amendment issue. To an extent it is if they're speaking, but they are apparently a part of a group with international ties. And this is where I think, there could be some moves made in dealing with them. Well, Bernie Sanders is bringing us to a very, very dangerous place. Yeah, Bernie Sanders sold out for sure. On the 24th, Thursday, Sanders issues stark warning on Trump and calls for election commission. Senator accused Trump and Republicans of sowing the seeds of chaos by casting doubt on the election. How absurd. The Democrats are the ones who changed the rules. They're the ones who want universal mail-in ballots. Whether you want the vote or not, it's a coming in many states. They changed all the rules, so Trump complains about it. Then they say it's Trump's fault. Well, Bernie Sanders on Bill Maher last night, there will be a number of plans to remove Trump if he loses. Wow. This is the kind of rhetoric that they point the finger at Trump. I can point the finger right back. They say Trump is refusing to have a peaceful transition. Joe Biden said it first. Well, to be fair, Hillary Clinton said it first about Joe Biden. So the Democrats said it first, that Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances. Bernie Sanders on Bill Maher, they're having a conversation about it. And my criticism to Bill Maher as well, because he said, it sounds like a wish that if Trump loses and stays, it's a wish that you want him to get out. What are you going to do about it? Come on, what are you going to do? And Bernie said, we've got plans, but we got to win. We got to win first. So they have plans. They've been planning for a forceful removal of the president. Here's the problem. While I can absolutely criticize Trump's rhetoric, we got to get rid of the ballots and, the only way I lose is if there's mischief. I agree. We got to be really careful on what we say. So I get it. You have both factions, Trump, Republicans and Democrats, pointing the finger. I understand why Trump is doing it. Trump and the Republicans aren't the ones who changed the election system. The Democrats did. And now the Democrats are saying they shouldn't concede. They have plans to remove Trump. None of them are going to believe the election. They say Trump is planning on staging a coup. They are sowing the seeds across the media, convincing the American people that the only way Trump wins is if he cheats. Then they're pointing at Trump and saying he's inflaming tensions by saying the only way he loses is if we cheat. Okay. You can't have your cake and eat it too, I suppose. Once you eat it, it's gone. And that's what we're getting from the Democrats. They're the ones sowing the seeds of discord. They could sit back and let the election take place as normal, but they will not do it. If they're the ones who are changing the rules, don't get mad at Trump. And I don't think that's a fair point to be made at all. When the Democrats are the ones encouraging the riots, when the Democrats are the ones saying they're setting up plans to remove Trump, the Democrats are the ones who are changing the rules. I think it's obvious which direction this is coming from. And we're seeing it across the board from Politico. Everyone sees the train wreck coming. Trump reveals his November endgame. Bum, bum, bum. After more than 4 years of nonstop voter fraud claims and insinuations that he might not accept the election results, the president isn't keeping his intent a secret. You know what I think they're doing? Donald Trump won the Electoral College and lost the popular vote. Because we do not determine president based on popular vote because we are a union of states, not a top-down federal country, for the most part. It's been slowly moving towards an overt federal, government for a long time. Like for a lot of people, they don't seem to understand Roe v. Wade. What if Roe v. Wade were to be abolished, it just means states decide for themselves. The left would say it would make, abortion illegal and stuff like that because they don't truly get it. We are a country, yes, but states have their own jurisdiction. Here's the story. They say after winning the presidency after 2016, Trump insisted, without evidence, that there was serious voter fraud in 3 states he lost to Hillary Clinton. Now, running behind Joe Biden in the polls, the president complains the outcome will be rigged. Here's what I think they're doing. They're going to say, because they're probably expecting him to win the Electoral College again, but lose the popular vote. That's what people are predicting. Everything they're doing will allow them to contest the states that grant him that bump over in the Electoral College. Then they'll say, the Electoral College is disputed, but the national popular vote says this. That'll be their excuse. Then when Trump says, I didn't lose just because these states are contested, and they'll say, we'll never get this solved. Oh, no. What should we do? Popular vote? No. I don't think we're going to see widespread violence if Trump wins. I mean it. I think we'll see violence. I think the far left has been violent. I think they'll continue to be violent. But what I mean is, let me rephrase. I think we'll see the worst violence if Trump loses. You know why? The Democrats changed the rules in many states, universal mail-in voting. Ballots have been found in dumpsters and ditches. So already people are saying, what is going on? And it wasn't the Republicans who did this. I think you will see organized and widespread violence if Trump loses, and it's the Democrats' fault. And maybe that's what they want. They want to create a system that will sow the seeds of doubt so that when Trump, when he does lose, regular people will assume the Democrats cheated. Now, on the left, people assume Trump is cheating, but Trump didn't change the rules. So sure, Antifa will come out and act a fool. But what do you think happens when right-wing militia groups see that they're claiming Trump didn't win, but we hear stories about ballots being found in dumpsters? They're going to say, no way. Trump didn't make that happen. There's no way that was Trump who did that. You wanted mail-in voting. Trump did not. So, did Trump have a plan for this? Was it all a clever ruse to trick the Democrats into wanting mail-in voting so that Trump could rig the Postal Service? No. The Democrats changed the rules. If Trump loses, who's going to believe the Democrats won fairly? Probably no one. I'm worried about the violence in that regard because that violence will be, I guess, groups of people calling themselves patriots challenging contesting the vote. It reminds me of a saying. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding on what's for dinner. A republic is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Now, that's been attributed to Benjamin Franklin. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I fear, actually. People feeling like they're justified and they really won and not believing it and coming out armed. And I'm not saying it's just going to be the right. I think the left will do this too. But I'm more worried about the power, the strength, the coordination of right-wing groups because the left seems to be running around randomly. Kamala Harris is encouraging this. Joe Biden is encouraging this. Sure, they're trying to have it both ways, but they're encouraging it all the same. And they won't call these groups out. The Democrats are changing the rules by executive decree, like here in New Jersey. So I'm worried about what happens when regular Americans who want Trump say no. I believe there are way more fervent Trump supporters than there are Antifa. And there are way more regular uninitiated Americans, many of whom just blindly vote. We'll see who wins and we'll see what happens. Because from here, it's all just speculation. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastNews. It's a different channel, and I will see you all then.